Hello and welcome to this special programme. We're live in the spin room directly beneath where the BBC election debate has just taken place. This is where the politicians, the journalists, the pollsters and commentators have gathered to watch the debate and each other. I'm Emily Maitlis, and over the next half an hour we're broadcasting live on BBC Television, Radio 5 Live and online, talking to the politicians from the parties who took part tonight and to some of those who didn't. And in among the melee for us is 5 Live's chief political correspondent, John Pienaar. John.
Hello, Emily. Well, look, it's warming up down here. They don't call it a spin room for nothing. It's like a high street laundromat just down here on the shop floor. I can see high-powered party workers spinning the line. I can see senior politicians, one or two of them Conservatives, although David Cameron wasn't here this evening, all backing it up with their sound bites and their copy for tonight's bulletins and tomorrow's morning paper front pages. And over here you can see row after row of journalists, political journalists, processing the lines that are coming at them. We'll see what comes out in the wash, what makes the bulletins, what makes the front pages. The copy is being written as I speak to you. It's all kicking off.
John, we'll be back with John in just a moment. But first, for the Conservatives, let's talk to William Hague. William Hague, thanks for being with us this evening. Let's start off with some of those comments from Ed Miliband. He accused David Cameron of choosing not to defend his record, of not turning up for a job interview. And Nicola Sturgeon went one further and called it a disgrace. I'm wondering if you regret that decision.
This is an agreed programme of events, as you know, of debates, of question times over the period of the election. The Prime Minister took part in the last one. As David Dimbleby has just been saying, there will be the question times of the three main party leaders in 2 weeks' time. This was the one for the opposition, and that's agreed by all broadcasters and all political parties. If they complain afterwards about what they agreed to in advance, well, they're not going to get very far in government, are they?
So when the polls suggest that the more the public seen of Ed Miliband, possibly the more they warm to him, do you think the same is true of David Cameron?
Certainly people warm to him when they meet him and hear him, and they can do that on the television every day throughout this election, and people are seeing him all over the country. But this debate was very specifically for the opposition parties, and I think what we saw was that them in any combination in a majority in the House of Commons would be a coalition of chaos, because two of them want to break up the country, most of them would bankrupt the country, and the consequences of the higher spending, higher debt, higher taxes that they would all bring in would be very serious for jobs and businesses across this country.
It sounded as if Nigel Farage was making overtures to the Conservatives when he responded to that last question. Have those conversations taking place, and are you accepting that might be a premise?
There are no such conversations. We are working for a Conservative majority. We're only just over 20 seats short of the majority from the last election. So that is our objective. Of course, a Conservative majority. There aren't any discussions with the other parties. But you did see here the interesting relationship between Labour and the SNP. Nicola Sturgeon, it's very clear from this debate, wants to put Ed Miliband into Downing Street and then drive him into more and more extreme positions. And it's also very clear from this, she would be in the driving seat as well.
But Ed Miliband did very clearly rule that out, didn't he? Let's look at some of the policy questions that arose. For example, housing, your right to buy measures that were announced earlier this week. Ed Miliband said that there was no money for it and it would bring social housing stock down. It would water it down, in essence.
Well, there was Ed Miliband talking about housing and claiming there isn't enough housing. More council houses have been built in the 5 years of this government than in the whole 13 years of the previous Labour government. You would never have thought that from what he was saying. And of course the policy that we have of allowing people to buy their homes means money would go back into the provision of more homes in the future. We're building more houses in this country now than at any time for 20 years. Again, that didn't happen under the last Labour government.
Okay.
So the good record is there under this government.
Let me put to you Nigel Farage's comments on defence. No one thought that a Conservative Prime Minister would run down the British Army like this. Many in your party feel the same way about your refusal to sign up to 2% of defence
We
spending.
had the duty of getting a grip on the defence budget. Vastly overcommitted by the last government. They had promised to buy things without providing the money to do so. We have sorted that out. The defence budget is in balance. We're committed to a major programme of defence procurement of equipment over the coming years, and no further reductions in the size of the regular armed forces, and of course to renew EU the nuclear deterrent. And again, you saw how the SNP all the time would be pressing Labour for weaker defences. There was an Ed Miliband Labour government with the SNP holding the balance of power. And I know you say Ed Miliband has ruled that out, but that is the position he would be stuck in. He can rule it out as much as he likes, but that's what he would be dependent on.
Let me briefly put to you one of the questions that was asked to the panel. Public services have been put at risk by greater immigration. You famously missed your target. Would you agree with that premise?
We have missed the target. David Cameron has said that, but we have reduced immigration from outside the EU to the lowest level since the 1990s. There's more we want to do on immigration, which is why we need to change some of the rules in the European Union. But the only party that is setting out in this election to have a new negotiation in Europe, rather than to just leave, which is the UKIP policy, to have a negotiation to create a Europe that works for us better, is the Conservative Party, and then to have a referendum. Again, most of these parties, other than UKIP, who of course want to pull out of Europe, would deny people a referendum and a choice on Europe.
Okay, one final thought from your colleague Ken Clarke, who said today that the party was too right-wing, that personal attacks would cost you votes, and he warned against blank cheque spending. From your own colleague Ken Clarke, is he right?
There's no blank cheque spending. We're always against blank cheque spending. This is a party that has controlled spending. We are saying in the coming years we need to save £1 more out of every £100 that the government spends, and to be able to reward hard-working people in this country by lifting more of them out of tax, by providing childcare for more of them with 3- and 4-year-olds. That is a sensible, balanced thing to do, and it's the right policy for the country.
William Hague, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Plenty to chew over there, but we're going back to John Pienaar right now and his guest. John.
Emily, you can see what it's like down here. It's somewhere between a rugby scrum and the first day of the Boxing Day sales. I can see politicians being interviewed. I can see spin doctors briefing journalists. I can see journalists interviewing journalists. I'm going to pick up with a couple of politicians over here, waiting patiently for a few words. Douglas Alexander, Labour's campaign strategy chief in this election. I want to talk about this question that William Hague was raising a moment ago about your party and the SNP and the chances or otherwise of you getting together. But first, your leader, I thought he held his own reasonably well under an awful lot of pressure this evening, just about held his own. But it doesn't matter how well he did, he's not realistically going to turn around the perception of Ed Miliband in the polls. He lags so dreadfully behind. Do you think he's done enough maybe for a few people to make him look a little less like a liability and a little bit more like an asset to your party?
I'd make a couple of points. First of all, there was a serious alternative to David Cameron on the stage this evening, an alternative Prime Minister, and that man was Ed Miliband. But undoubtedly the biggest loser this evening was actually William Hague's former boss, because actually the bizarre judgment of David Cameron not to turn up for a job interview with the British public has ended up going catastrophically wrong for the Conservatives. The biggest loser undoubtedly was David Cameron, and we relish the opportunity for Ed Miliband to have made the case once again that there is a better alternative if people vote Labour in 3 weeks.
So I'm going to come back to you in a second. I'll have a word with Hamza Yousaf, a minister in the Scottish Government, Minister for Europe with the SNP. They've been talking up on the stage there with Emily about the prospect of SNP Labour doing business together. Look, there was never going to be a coalition. For the same reasons, it would be impossible to do a formal deal, whether it's confidence in supply or whatever it is. You're going to be propping up, if you get a chance, and if they get to be the biggest party, you could be propping up Labour, vote by vote, week by week, just waiting for the moment, perhaps when you can pull the rug. Isn't that fair?
No, actually what we're saying, and Nicola Sturgeon put the challenge to Ed Miliband very clearly, if there's enough anti-Tory MPs in Westminster, will the Labour Party join with progressive parties like the SNP to lock David Cameron out of power? Now, when he was asked that question,
but you're not, Hamza, you're not going to, if I may, you're not going to pull down a Labour government at the first chance you get. You'll let them stay there for a while, let them have a run, then choose your moment, yes or no.
Having 4 years of minority government ourselves, we can make life very difficult for the Labour Party.
Quick word from Douglas.
It's just a matter of arithmetic. Every one less Labour MP takes David Cameron one step closer to Downing Street. The SNP have got a bizarre strategy. It's to vote Wales, vote for Clyde, in England, vote for the Greens.
And you, Douglas, you've got a real fight on your hand. That's for sure.
Message. If you want a Labour government, vote Labour. It's as simple as that.
He got his slogan in. We've got to leave it there, Emily.
Give him a backbone is what we'd say.
Over to you.
Thanks, John, very much. Well, with me now for the Liberal Democrats is Danny Alexander. Welcome, Danny Alexander. Thanks for being with us. The Lib Dems were barely mentioned in that hour-and-a-half debate. I don't think their name was said once. Do you worry that you have not been missed as a party?
Well, we were excluded from this debate by the broadcasters at David Cameron's insistence. We wanted to be here to defend our record in government. And I have to say, I think if you're a moderate centre ground voter watching that debate, you will have come away pretty alarmed because there was no one there offering a responsible plan on the economy. There was no one there offering the balanced centre ground idea. And given that neither the Tories nor the Labour Party can win an outright majority, the key issue for a lot of voters is who's going to be holding the balance of power. And on the evidence of tonight, the idea of a Tory coalition with UKIP or a Labour coalition with the SNP is extremely alarming, and that's why I think people need to have the Liberal Democrats to make sure that we can have a balanced, sensible, centre-ground policy, a strong economy and a fair society. You didn't hear that from any of the leaders speaking tonight.
So when you say there was no one there who offered a balanced, responsible look at the economy, does that rule out your being able to work with Labour, who your leader hinted yesterday didn't have a brain? His words, not mine.
Well, it was really striking tonight that Ed Miliband was challenged to explain where would he find savings, how would he pay for some of his promises. He didn't even bother to make an excuse of trying to answer that question. Look, I think this is why you need the Liberal Democrats in the next Parliament in strong numbers, because if you have a Labour Party, you're going to need the Liberal Democrats to make sure that we have a plan that is responsible to sort out the economic problems of this country that we've made a good job of in this Parliament, but there's more to be done. But on the Tory side, you know, you see this immense unfairness in their plans. You see this risk of a Tory UKIP arrangement. Some of Nigel Farage's views tonight, I think most people, most civilised people, will have found absolutely outrageous. Nick Clegg today was talking about the risk of blue kip, as he called it, the Tories and UKIP working together. Again and again, it makes the argument for, if you want a responsible, balanced, strong coalition government, the only way to get it is through the Liberal Democrats.
Let's talk about some of those arrangements then. Would you rule out a coalition that included the DUP and the Conservatives, or the DUP and Labour?
Well, I'm not going to get into trying to negotiate coalition deals now. What we just,
well, you have already ruled out working with UKIP, and you talked about
we've just had 90 minutes of 5 party leaders explaining their policies. What I want to get across tonight is that there is a different way, that the country doesn't have to lurch to the extremes with UKIP and the Tories, or with Labour and some of the left-wing parties you heard tonight. We can keep this country on track. We can keep to a balanced plan. But the only way to keep to a balance, a strong economy and a fair society, the only way to make sure that everyone in this country has the opportunity to get on, is to make sure that there are Liberal Democrats involved in the government of the country in future. Because I have to say, listening to that rabble tonight, people will be very worried about the future of their country if any of them are influencing the shape of the government in the next Parliament.
Nicola Sturgeon said coalition government has become an excuse for broken policies. Now, the Lib Dems know that better than anyone.
Look, of course, we haven't got everything right in this government, and of course, when you're the minority party in a coalition, you can't deliver all of your policies, though there was one academic study suggested that 75% of the Lib Dem manifesto has been delivered by this coalition. And on the big things, sorting out the economy, getting the economy growing, creating jobs for the working people of this country, cutting taxes for working people, the signature Lib Dem commitment in our last manifesto, we have delivered and delivered and delivered again. That's our record, and we've delivered in a way that makes sure that people in this country have a strong economy, but also have a fair society too.
Would you be part of a Labour SNP coalition if that came about, or an arrangement, let's say?
Well, look, we've said we don't think that the SNP should be contributing to the government of the United Kingdom. You'd no more put the SNP, who want to break up the UK, in charge of UK policy than you would put UKIP in charge of the European Union. They've all got ideas that would be very, very damaging for this country. But again, look, in a sense what you're expressing is the choice. Do you want Nigel Farage, Nicola Sturgeon or Nick Clegg holding the balance of power? I want Nick Clegg holding the balance of power because it's the only way to keep this country on the straight and narrow.
And if he's not holding the balance of power, if he's not in government next time, he would have to quit as Lib Dem leader.
Well, I fear for the country if Liberal Democrats
are not... Is that a yes or
no? I want Nick to carry on for the leader for many, many years to come. But I fear for the country if Liberal Democrats are not holding the balance. I think a lot of people tonight, hearing from the left-wing leaders, hearing from UKIP and the extreme right policies that they put forward, can see a country that will be dragged off to the extremes unless the Liberal Democrats are there to anchor us in the centre ground.
Danny Alexander, thank you very much indeed. We're live on television on Radio 5 Live. We're at the Central Hall of Westminster, where the BBC's election debate has just taken place. And in amongst the crowds of pundits and politicians is John Pienaar.
Thanks very much, Emily. You can see it's getting busier and busier down here. People going everywhere, spinning this way and that. I've clacked some more politicians from the crowd, a bit like a fly fisherman. Mark Reckless, a UKIP member of Parliament, quite a new one. We were waiting for your leader, Nigel Farage, to come up with some sort of shock and awe contribution, and there wasn't one. Have you run out of momentum and steam and lost your mojo?
Well, he didn't need to, because he was on that stage representing the whole centre as well as right of British politics. It was like a student union debate with 4 people on that stage competing to spend other people's money. Nigel was the only adult in the room actually trying to pull our politics back in a sensible direction.
Okay, quick word from you, Adam Price from Plaid Cymru. Look, when it comes to the leader, Ed Miliband of the Labour Party, he was the only sort of potential Prime Minister of the future up on the stage. Where do you guys fit in? He's called Red Ed by the Conservatives. He's not quite red enough for you, is he?
I think it's a powerfully invigorating moment because politics has come alive. The monopoly of the old parties has been broken. They're kind of stale, sterile politics of the past. We've got the birth of a new high bandwidth democracy, kind of a multi-party politics for a multi-nation Britain.
Okay, and Jean Lambert from the Green Party, where do you fit into the picture? You're part of this progressive anti-austerity alliance. What do you add to it all?
Well, I think what we add to it is certainly, I think, a lot of courage and a willingness to take on some of the issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's immigration, in a positive way that we haven't been hearing at all in this election.
I guess you'll be lucky to hang on to one seat, though. Isn't that the way it's shaking out?
The way it's shaking out at the moment is, yes, at least one, and it's looking good in a few other places too.
Okay, nothing wrong with a bit of optimism, Emily.
John, thanks very much. Well, we've spoken to the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats in the past few minutes. And of course, there's another group of parties who weren't on the stage tonight, those based in Northern Ireland. There are 18 constituencies across Northern Ireland, with 138 candidates running to become an MP in this election. The Democratic Unionist Party won 8 seats at the last election and were the largest Northern Ireland party at Westminster. The DUP's list of demands to support a coalition include calls for extra defence spending and for an EU referendum. They lean to the right, but have said they're prepared to do a deal with either the Conservatives or Labour. Sinn Féin won 5 of Northern Ireland's 18 seats last time. They are left-leaning and fighting this election campaign with a message that they'll oppose Tory cuts. However, their MPs don't take their seats in the House of Commons. The Social Democratic and Labour Party had 3 MPs last time. The SDLP have long ties with the Labour Party, and they would be their first and natural choice for any coalition. The Alliance Party had 1 MP elected in 2010. It says it won't commit to a single party, and if they're elected again, they'll vote on an issue-by-issue basis. The Ulster Unionist Party, like the DUP, leaned to the right, and in 2010 had an electoral alliance with the Conservatives, although they didn't win any seats. They say they'd be open to a deal with either the Conservatives or Labour. There was also 1 independent MP in Northern Ireland during the last Parliament. Well, Sinn Féin's Chris Hazard is in Belfast. He joins us now. Chris Hazard, your response as an anti-austerity party to what you've heard this evening, has there been a game changer for you?
Well, I think tonight has been a stark illustration of the failure of those local parties who take their seats at Westminster to make any sort of impact on the day and daily issues at Westminster. And it's also a pertinent example of how local issues here in Ireland do not register for the political establishment at Westminster. What we've seen tonight in this debate is a strong alternative put forward. It's a message that Sinn Féin have been putting forward. It's a platform of change, and it's something that our people badly need.
And would you be prepared to take up your Westminster seats, which traditionally you don't, if it meant keeping an austerity party, the Conservatives, out?
Sinn Féin are a proud Republican abstentionist party. As we've seen tonight, those parties from here in Ireland who take their seats are making absolutely no impact. If we look at the big successes, they've come through direct negotiations with the British government. If it's the latest Stormont House negotiations that delivered 700 million for shared and integrated schools, if it's the devolution of policing and justice powers that came with the Western Park, or the Good Friday agreements, Anything that we deliver for our people is delivered through direct negotiations. It is not delivered through Westminster. It would be it questions about Ouija board regulations that Gregory Campbell has asked, or early day motions about Afghanistan. The people of Ireland, the issues that matter to the people of Ireland, are taken up through direct negotiations with the British government.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris Hazard. Also in Belfast, Nigel Dodds from the Democratic Unionist Party. Nigel Dodds, you've made it clear that you could work with either party. Has anything changed that tonight?
Well, I think there were two things missing from the stage tonight. First of all, the Prime Minister, of course, and I think his absence has certainly benefited Ed Miliband, if anybody. But secondly, the voice from Northern Ireland, because those of us in the DUP who take our seats at Westminster and have made a powerful difference for Northern Ireland by doing so, can make a real difference in the next Parliament. Everyone agrees that our 8, 9, 10 seats, and we had more seats than some of the parties that we're debating tonight, can be used either to support Ed Miliband or David Cameron. We've worked with both parties in the past, and we can work with either in the future, but depending on whether or not we can get a good deal, first of all, of course, for Northern Ireland, but also for the country as a whole. We want to strengthen the United Kingdom, strengthen the Union, and we want to see the country moving forward in the right direction.
So, Nigel Dodds, what are the most important things then that you would demand from either party? You've said that Labour would have to offer an EU referendum?
Yes, I think it's important that we want to strengthen the Union. We saw tonight, two nationalist parties on the stage wanting to break up the United Kingdom. We want to strengthen the United Kingdom. We want to see the United Kingdom strong at home and abroad. That's why we're very much committed to the 2% of GDP spend on defence. We think that's right. We want to see the deficit dealt with in a responsible way, but in a compassionate way, and that's why we have opposed the bedroom tax, for instance. And we do want to see an EU referendum. It's time that people in the United Kingdom had their say on membership of the United Kingdom, or membership of the European Union, and also stronger immigration controls.
Just give us a brief sense, Nigel Dodds. We know that the DUP wanted to be part of that debate tonight. What do you think was missing from there that you would have brought?
Well, I think we would have brought a clear commitment to the Union. I think it's very important to emphasise the enormous contribution Northern Ireland makes to the United Kingdom. 20% of our reserve forces in the armed forces come from Northern Ireland voluntarily, although we only make up 3% of the population. Our people make an enormous contribution to the United Kingdom as a whole. And whilst we have published a 5-point plan for the benefit of Northern Ireland, we want to grow our economy, we want to see public services strengthened, we want to see things moving forward in terms of the peace process, but we have a great vision for our country as a whole, and we will work to strengthen the United Kingdom. We will work to give people power back into their hands and to deal with the deficit in a responsible way, but in a compassionate and caring way. And I think that the Northern Ireland MPs in the next Parliament can be a very powerful influence for good.
Nigel Dodds, thanks very much indeed. And just to remind you, tonight, Newsnight will be talking to the 5 main Northern Ireland parties in a special programme from Belfast. That's with Evan Davis on BBC 2 at 10:30. Viewers in Northern Ireland can see it on BBC 1 at 10:45. Back now to John Pienaar.
Well, Emily, it's a bit like a teeming cocktail party down here, but without the booze. But we're enjoying ourselves all the same. I've managed to grab hold of a couple of members of the audience who were watching the debate this evening. Let's just get a few of their feelings on what they've had to see. Just tell us who you are and what did you make of the debate?
My name's Mike Cripps. I thought the debate was excellent. Shame that David Cameron wasn't here.
Yeah.
But great debate. And for me, I've got to say, Nicola Sturgeon took the...
She gets your prize tonight.
I can't vote for her, unfortunately. I live in England, but I think if you're looking at the debate...
Big thumbs up then for Nicola Sturgeon. Has it affected your vote, perhaps, maybe?
I was going to vote UKIP, believe it or not, so from left to right, but possibly.
Okay. You're now leaning towards who?
A little bit undecided, maybe.
A floating voter. What about you? Tell us who you are. What did you think?
My name is Christine Plumpton. I have always voted Conservative, and I think I probably will vote Conservative, but I am leaning a little bit to UKIP because I do agree with lots of his arguments. I personally thought Nicola Sturgeon was awful.
Awful?
Awful, and I wouldn't vote for her at all. I find her very aggressive and undermines people. I don't like her at all.
Okay, so you guys are cancelling each other out. One away from UKIP, one
Yes,
leaning towards
yes.
them. Let's get a little sense, if we can, of what might be appearing on the front pages tomorrow. A lot of the copy's been written already. We can just tap into it now. Kevin Maguire, associate editor of the Mirror, and Kate Devlin from the Herald. What do you make of it, Kevin? What are you writing for tomorrow?
Well, I think we're saying that Ed Miliband job half done, because he looked like the alternative Prime Minister. David Cameron gave him a vacancy. He filled it. The others were asking him questions. But the other half of the job he didn't do was knock down Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP. She didn't dominate the way she did the first debate, but she was gutsy, put her points across very well, and you can see how she is such a formidable threat to Labour in Scotland.
So you were hoping that Ed Miliband was going to vaguely sort of knock her to one side and just fail to do that?
Well, I wondered if he would, and he didn't.
Kate Devlin, what did you make of it?
I think you have to say it was another very good night for Nicola Sturgeon. I think some Scottish Labour MPs will take some comfort from the fact that Ed Miliband did do as they'd asked, that he did try and tackle her on independence, on full fiscal autonomy. You have to admit the SNP leader had another very good night this evening.
In a word, do you think this debate this evening, entertaining as it was to watch, quite interesting in parts, is it going to move anything, move the polls?
I think it's as clear as mud what will happen on May the 7th.
What do you think, Kate?
Even if they move the polls, I mean, in which way? I mean, it's very hard to tell.
It is deadlock, isn't it, you guys? I mean,
it is. And no one is going to break through. And all 5 people on that panel will go home thinking they did well. Even Nigel Farage, he polarises, but he is aiming at a core, angry UKIP audience. And he probably hit home with them. He lost the hall, of course, but that doesn't matter. He is aiming for people who are watching at home, the voters.
Okay, got to leave it there. Behind me in the hall, they're starting to drift towards the tables and their word processors, bashing away their copy, getting it in for the first editions. It's going to be fun to read those. They're happening as we speak, Emily.
John, thanks very much. Well, that's pretty much it from us here in the Spin Room, which, as you can see, is very much alive and kicking. The night is young here. There'll be plenty more to come. More reaction on Radio 5 Live and on the BBC News channel. And on BBC One, David Dimbleby is on his way right now to the Question Time studio for a live programme which starts at 10:45 after the news at 10. So from all of us here at Westminster, a very good night. Bye-bye.